We're good? All right.
Well, I just wanted to start with this slide, which is not from somebody who is from the animal movement. This is a professor of animal science at Oregon State University. In other words, he makes his living basically by teaching people who are going into animal agriculture. That's the people he's talking to. And yet he himself acknowledges that the meat industry in this country survives basically because most consumers are ignorant of the way it's produced. And I think we have an ethical problem there right from the start if people are consuming something because when they're ignorant of the processes and would not consume it, or many of them would not, as Professor Cheek admits, if indeed they were aware of it, then we have a problem. And so he's talking about things like chicken. Well, this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. 20,000 birds perhaps reared in a single shed. And most people don't know about this and don't know like the footage that my colleague Bruce Friedrich showed you about how they're slaughtered. So I think that's the first thing. And I'm very pleased that the opposing team in the form of Mr. Sanur acknowledged that industrial produced meat is something that we should not be eating, both in terms of the suffering it produces, also in terms of the waste of resources, and he added some arguments for us, thank you very much, in terms of the antibiotics fed to the animals, which build up resistance to antibiotics that are necessary to save life for humans, and there's hormones and other things that are not good for you. So thank you very much, because that effectively concedes 99% of our case. 99% being roughly the figure of meat production in this country that is produced intensively through intensive large-scale agriculture. So those of you who are here because you think, well, I think it's okay to eat meat, if you accept the arguments of the opposition, you're going to have to start looking very, very hard to find the non-industrialized meat production, which even the opposition says you ought to be restricted to eating. But let's look at some of the other arguments that were being made. It was suggested that we have a problem in saying why suffering is a problem. That suffering only matters because it's an evolutionary signal about harm. But it's a crass fallacy to take your ethics from looking at the evolutionary origins of the way we and non-human animals are. You can't deduce ethics from evolution in that way. The point is that suffering matters because of the way it feels. And it doesn't matter why it's evolved. We all know that. I mean, if someone is subjecting you to torture, maybe you have information that they want, and they say to them, you know, don't worry, we're very clever, we can torture you agonizingly for hours and it will do no damage. You'll still be able to walk out of here without a mark on your body. You're not going to say, oh, well, that's fine then, because it's only bad if suffering is only bad if it causes harm. So it's the same for animals. If they suffer, it's bad because of what it is, because of the state that they're actually in. The opposition also suggested that we should participate in the market as ethical buyers and also sustainably fish sea life. Well, there is certainly no humanely killed fish that I'm aware of that you can buy anywhere in this country. It's all killed in a form that causes agony, sometimes for quite long periods while the fish die. Even the much touted better farms often have very severe welfare problems, as anybody who's looked at the lauded Joel Salatin polyface farm would be aware. Animals being slaughtered without pre-stunning, close confinement of chickens, and many other problems. It's also not relevant that most of the corn grown in the United States today is feed corn. The point is that we are using cropland to grow this corn. And this cropland, whether or not it would grow sweet corn, I'm not an expert on that, would certainly be able, a large part of it anyway, to grow food that we can eat directly and therefore reach much more food value than we can by growing feed corn and feeding it to animals. After all, there are people all over the world who do grow crops on soil that is much less rich than the lands that we are fortunate enough to have in this country, and they grow varieties of grain that are not very familiar to us here, maybe teff, for example, which is grown in Ethiopia, not a region known for its good soils or abundant rainfall, but they can produce food from it. So maybe there are grains like that that we could be growing in this country and therefore getting much better food value. And some of the land, maybe we should just, since we could produce a great abundance of food if we didn't feed it all to animals, maybe some of that land we should allow to revert to nature and to wildlife, thereby improving the ecology, soaking up some greenhouse gases, and providing more area for wildlife. And let me finally say, we are not debating here whether it's ethical for the Inuit, for example, to eat meat, or for the Maasai tribespeople in Africa who have to live on grasslands where they can only get meat by grazing cattle because you can't grow crops on that soil and that climate. We're debating whether it is ethical to eat meat here and now, given the options we have available to us. If we walk into the dining halls here at Princeton, if we walk into the supermarket, if you walk down to Whole Earth on Nassau Street, given the options that we have here to feed ourselves in a healthy, environmentally sustainable way with a far lower carbon footprint than if we eat meat, and of course with far less cruelty, that's the question. Is it ethical to eat meat? So let's not talk about people who don't have the options that we are fortunate enough to have. Let's think about what is the ethics for eating meat, in the situation that we live with the choices that we're in. Thank you very much.